Hello and welcome to our backstage conversation for October, with Halloween in the offing, and perhaps more notably, the presidential election on November 5th, so that by our next show, we'll know, or we'll probably know, or who knows what we'll know by then. Today's backstage talent is stellar. Together, they will describe an era of Black theater at Antioch in the 70s. Two of the foremost actors are Peggy Pettit and Will Badgett, who actually have both been on Backstage before. And Downing Kless was on the faculty for several years during this period and very instrumental in making Black theater happen. We also just found out before we started that he also marched in the marching band twice at the Rose Bowl parade. So there. So I'll turn it over to Downing now to run the show.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And first of all, I want to start with thanks so much to Paula, Barry, Susan, Jesse, and the whole team that does this every month. And I now am much more aware of just how arduous it is. And then I also want to thank, we're going to be seeing some photos and videotapes, and in general, the knowledge of all the productions here was very much helped by Scott Sanders, who is the Antioch archivist. And then I want to thank for the videos, particularly Vince Waldron. We were in 2016. There'd been water damage to a lot of the videos in the roof leak from the library. And so Vince took those that were able to be restored from this period out to Los Angeles and restored them. But a disclaimer, they are very fuzzy. You still see the image, you still hear. Some of that is how old they were. Some of it's the water damage. Some of it is that the technology was really pretty novel at that point. And so, you know, they didn't have the best cameras or sound equipment.
Potato chips, beer. This is gonna be fantastic. Girls, two girls, wouldn't you know it? No boys, I had to stop at two though. Two girls who couldn't give a shit about basketball.
What you want, Mom?
I want to teach you something.
What?
I want to teach you how to appreciate basketball.
I hate basketball.
Sit down.
That Antioch made a big effort to recruit more Black students around the end of the 1960s, and had, you know, with more financial aid, and so around 1970, Black theater ensembles got created, and two young Black faculty members got hired. I think when Paul Treichler retired, there were funds to do that, and so they very wisely made that decision to hire Esteban Vega and Walter Dallas. And those first 2 years were remarkable. They did at least one Black drama every quarter, and covered a lot of the major ones and well-known ones. Tabernacle by Paul Carter Harrison. They were doing in the quartet that Walter Dallas directed, had Leroy Jones and Douglas, I think it was Douglas Turner Ward, and then a student directed God's Trombones. And I want to say that J.L. Smith is here, who was there during those first 2 years. Then Esteban Vega did Wally Soyinka pieces, two Wally Soyinka pieces, Nigerian, did Raisin in the Sun. And so it was just, and Black Nativity by Langston Hughes. So amazing work going on there in those first 2 years. particularly Esteban just was always directing. I don't know how he had time for his kids, actually. He had little young kids at that point. Um, and and then, you know, Walter Dallas left suddenly, actually, in the middle of the summer of 72 to go direct professionally in Atlanta. And so that's when I got hired and came in and worked with Esteban. Esteban continued to direct pretty much, if not every quarter, at least a couple of shows a year. Um, and so Peggy was there. So we will now introduce Peggy. Um, and um, and in my first year there, she had just gone off to do Black Girl. So first of all, Peggy, I'm just going to ask you, how did and when did you come to Antioch? And tell us how you then got involved with theater, because you hadn't been that involved when you were in high school.
No, in fact, how I got started was, well, first of all, I was raised in St. Louis, Missouri by my grandparents, and my grandparents were born 1900. And so my home education was special. I was still saying tote when kids were saying carry. I was speaking like my grandparents spoke. And I had a lot of catching up to do. And as a result of that, I was held back um, from my high school graduation. By the time I was 18, most of the students my age had gone ahead of me because I failed the fifth grade and I had to make up for time, and and I needed to reading skills, the whole shebang. And but by the time I graduated, most of those kids were the guys were in the Vietnam War, the girls were pregnant and on the front porch. But uh, I had begun to take classes at Webster College in a program called Upward Bound. And I think in many ways, maybe Upward Bound saved my life because it introduced me to people who had a vision for the future. And they included me in that vision and worked very hard to apply for funding and grants to get me to through affirmative action to get me to Antioch College. And so that was quite, no one in my family had gone to college. And I know people hear that all the time, but they stood a snowball's chance. It was as if, I think I spoke with Downing about this. It was as if time had sort of passed us by. And the fact that affirmative action was there, that the students at Antioch, some who were engaged at Webster College, saw to it that a kid like me could actually go a little further was tremendous. And so that's how I got to Antioch College. Um, and there, you have to remember that I was going to college. Nobody in my family had gone to college, so I was dressed up when I went my first day of college. I was going to college. I looked like a college student, like my grandmother's idea of a college student. And when I got there, everybody, they were walking around and barefoot and eating hummus, and I never in my life saw an artichoke heart, and I'm eating artichoke and and just trying to survive. And and the other thing was that my father, one of the reasons I was raised by my grandfather was and my grandmother was because of the fact that my family had a difficult time. My mother and father had a difficult time. My father was in prison, and he was in prison. This was Missouri, very tough in the 50s. He got 12 years, he served 9. And I'm feeling this now as I grow older, that I remember distinctly entering a dorm room and seeing more marijuana than what my father served 9 years for. And it just blew me away, the contrast of life. And so I had this shock of of differences. And at the same time, the students themselves were, oh man, I feel like I was raised with wolves. They were progressive, aggressive, um, supportive, human. Uh, I remember going home with a bunch of kids with this, and they were all hippies, and they got out of the car. And when I heard my grandfather say "yes, ma'am" and "no, sir" to these kids, I I understood where I was from and the distance I had traveled because of that Upward Bound program and because of those Antioch students. And so that's how I got there. Yes.
Yeah, and then tell us about how you got into Black Girl and then about the production at Antioch, and we have some photos of that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if any of you remember Flo Kennedy. She was an activist and a very tough lady, and she saw me perform. She wore a cowboy hat, and she saw me perform. I think it was an Amen Corner or something like that. And after the show, she said to me, "You know, the next work study, you should go to New York and you should audition for that play they got out called Black Girl Theater." And they had been auditioning hundreds of girls. And for some reason, I said a few lines, and I got asked to do it. So I was on a work study. I was touring around the country on stage with Black Girl, and the
A
writer.
Broadway show.
It,
Oh,
it was at the Delice Theater, but I was traveling with a touring company, and the writer saw me, Jay Franklin, and she wanted me to play Billie Jean in the film when there were a lot of fine actresses from Diana Ross and other people who wanted that part too. She struggled very hard to make sure that I got the lead in that movie. And then I was away. Now, guys, this is a detail that I don't say often, but this is a fact. While I was away so long between the touring and the film that I got automatically withdrawn. And I remember receiving that letter and being so sensing that I could not tell my family that I had been withdrawn from college. There's just no way. By the time the film came out, I got another letter saying, "Oh, we're so glad you're an Antioch student and welcome back. You never really left. I mean, not really." You know? So, all those contradictions, and I think I've been holding a grudge for 52 years, actually. But it all worked out, and when Sean Kirill Powell, an Antioch student, wanted to direct it at Antioch, and we were all students, same age, and but what I found with that cast and with that director, I had worked with Ossie Davis and Shawneel Perry, but what I found was that there was maybe a sense of the purity and the sense that there was real, this idea of professionalism, that there was no self-indulging. It was really about the work and about the collaboration of working on it. Now, unfortunately, many of the people in that cast are deceased now, but they were young and interested and intelligent and supported one another in a way that I had not seen professionals do. There was a sense of community and that we're all putting in at the table. And I remember taking directions from Kirill with my whole self. I didn't hold anything back, and it was just a wonderful experience to work with black, really amazing black actresses and actors, and being directed by my a peer. It was wonderful. And that Antioch gave us that space to be who we were, not live in a world where we're so reduced, but to be fully who you are. And for the first time, maybe in my life at Antioch, people took what I said seriously. They listened to me like I had something to say that was worth listening to. It was a whole new planet, and I'm really grateful for that experience.
and that's amazing because you'd been in the Broadway touring
Yay.
production and then the film, and found somehow that really that the work with those student actors and Kirill as a director,
Yeah.
you know, and then several of those, Stephanie Alston, who was in that, Kirill, and you joined Aaron Taylor and Mickey Hawkins as half of the ensemble that created a play about sports in America, because, hey, sports is what we all share. Okay. And so that we decided that was what we were going to take on for creating an original play in an ensemble. It was actually pretty fully the curricular work. I think 3/4 of your classwork was that 1/4 that we developed it. And then, you know, I think it was part of the co-op, or at least a credit when we opened it at Antioch in September. So we worked all summer. It was a summer quarter that we worked to create "Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser," famous quote by Leo DeRocher, who is cartooned here on the front cover. So Peggy, tell us about you know, your response to the ensemble work. There were 5 of you who were Black actors, 5 white actors, and then Roger Babb and I. Roger was maybe going to be on today, but I don't think can.
Well, Roger and you and all you guys, the lying down on the grass and taking a deep breath in and letting it out, and the trust exercises, falling off a table and letting skinny people catch you in their arms and carry you around the room. It was all wonderful. It was all new. And again, I think this is something that maybe those who have continued to make theater learn specifically there, that if you wanted to make it happen, you had to make it happen. If there was a subject you wanted to deal with, you didn't wait for the right script to come along and address it. You had to throw down and make this thing happen. So it meant that you had to learn how to cooperate. You had to learn how to listen. You had to exchange. You had to value your colleagues' words. Like suddenly they were up there with everybody else. And I remember we had so much fun doing that. Show me a good loser. We had so much fun because we were allowed to stretch ourselves, and there was always a discovery in that. We were always learning from each other. We listened to each other.
Developed the script together.
Yes, yeah.
There are a lot of monologues that are actually personal monologues about experiences in sport, but there also are, even the scene work was very much developed by the acting company through improvisation. And then Mark Dunow kind of got his playwriting start there.
That's
He
right.
was in the acting ensemble too, but he really shaped the improvs into scenes. And you know, we chose a bunch of characters to follow through on. So you're going to get to see a little segment here of Peggy playing a mother who is trying to convince her recalcitrant daughters that they should like basketball.
And that's Kirill Powell and Stephanie Austin.
Correct.
So wonderful performance.
So let's roll that video.
Girls? 2 girls, wouldn't you know it? No boys. I had to stop at 2 though. 2 girls who couldn't give a shit about basketball.
What you want, Mom?
I want to teach you something.
What?
I want to teach you how to appreciate basketball.
I hate basketball.
Sit down. Oh, you're not going to sit down, huh? Now, Kirill, how come you don't like basketball? You ain't never in your life watched the game. All you do is play with them damn dolls you got.
I'm a little old for dolls, don't you think, Mom?
Yes, I do. And that's exactly why I want to teach you how to appreciate basketball. Now look, Kirill, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Now either you're going to give me the pleasure of your company doing this damn basketball game, and I'm taking away your allowance. You're right, it's not fair. I'm an unfair person. Now sit down, Khalil. Now see, that's better. Now why can't you be like your sister Stephanie? She wants something out of life. And she knows that I'm going to ask her to do something that didn't have a point to it. That's why Stephanie's even got a little coordination. Now let me tell you something. This is the big game, and it's being played in Houston. And it's the Rockets versus the Missiles for the conference championship. Now the winner goes to the NCAA playoffs, and the star of the Missiles is Aaron Teller, and he's playing on guts alone. Now that's what this game is all about, skill and guts. Anyway, he was averaging 26 points a game, but he hurt his knee. Now he knows his team has got to win, so he's going to play anyhow. Second year, and he's fantastic.
Why don't you turn on the TV then, Mom?
Here, girl, listen.
Let's move on to God's Trombones. Dwayne Jones was hired in the literature department, actually, but he did direct a couple of shows, and this was the big one that he did. It's by James Weldon Johnson, again, one of the Harlem Renaissance great writers. And Peggy, tell us a little bit about God's Trombones and where you actually did it's a series of sermons, and you did the sermon called The Creation.
Yeah, it was the sermon that opened it, and it was 7 sermons. But what was particularly beautiful about it, I think, is that it was written it was written in 7. There were these 7 sermons that sort of encapsulated the style and the orating force of the African American language, and that the theater was in the church, that the sense of exchange with an audience, that the audience, even though you were speaking to them, they were always participating. So there was this, it was wonderful, it was funny, it was deep, it was spiritual. It had so much Africa, the griot, the transference from West Africa to the shores of America, and this powers over language was right. Everything was right there in that God's Trombones, and Dwayne Jones did a brilliant job with these students who were so willing to learn the dialect and all that it took to do that. It was a creative piece, very.
And then we get to around 1975. Esteban Vega continues to direct a number of plays during that period from 72 to 75. In 75, he does an evening 3 in Black, and you can bring up that slide now. And that included a play, Happy Ending by Douglas Turner Ward, very famous little play, 1 act, and Dutchman, probably the most famous 1 act by in Black drama, and that was with MacArthur Wilder, and then Sherry Roberts played Lula, and we have a photo of that, actually, I think, and that was Esteban's last show before leaving. He left Antioch to go to Wesleyan University. And here's a shot. It's for those who may not know Dutchman, it's on the subway, and Karen Wagner, who's with us today, and I think Sherry's with us. Karen's one of the passengers over on the right, and MacArthur is not here today, I think. But in any case, that then by 1975, one reason that Esteban left and Dwayne left is that there'd been a lot of turbulence around the reductions of financial aid for Black students, And there were even a big strike in 1973 about that. And that then led to, far fewer Black students. And of course, then when Esteban left, we did have one person get hired for the following year, but then he left and there was not a replacement because the college was getting into great financial distress at that point too. So the second half of the 70s is largely Will Badgett and a series of his cohorts who kind of carried the flame forward in the work that they did. So Will, tell us how you got to Antioch and why you got to Antioch and involved in theater.
Well, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and so artistically, I did a lot of like in high school, did a lot of singing groups and stuff. But it was the late '60s and stuff, and Cleveland was very, I mean, in the late '60s, I had a lot of problems, as far as like there were the riots in Cleveland in '69. And stuff, and I got involved with a lot of diversity stuff. Back then, there was a thing that was going on, like in Shaker Heights of Cleveland, the suburbs of Cleveland, where people from the inner city would be going out to Shaker Heights to have these rap sessions with the white folk out in the Heights, And so that got me. That was sort of the political stuff that I was involved in before getting to Antioch. Now, but I also had gotten into a lot of trouble, a lot of youth did in those times, and had to do some time. And so I was incarcerated for a while. But when I was released, I was studying like computer technology and stuff, and I decided that I was going to go to Wittenberg University in the right now famous Springfield, Ohio. But then Wittenberg was a little too hardcore as far as academics were concerned, and one of the reasons that and so I transferred to Antioch, who I had known about because I had also been a student at Central State some years before. But then one of the big things about Antioch was the no grades, right? So that was that was very appealing to me. And so, but then while I was there, that very first summer of '75, I met this guy. I was walking through campus, and this guy, he says, "Oh, you carry yourself like a performer, like an actor. They're having these plays down at the amphitheater. You should go down there and audition." And so I did, and I got down there, and I auditioned, and next thing I knew, I was in Mother Courage, directed by Meredith Dallas. And so, and it was amazing. It was like Peggy said, that it's this thing of the way people were working together, and just it was just amazing to me. And there that's where I met Louise Smith and stuff, and other people that I still know today. And that's an incredible thing to me. That is incredible to me. And then the other play that we did was The Tempest, that Downing directed, and I had the role of the bosun was the role, and a lot of other little supernumerary things. I was a spy, course, a spirit and all that other stuff. But then the thing about doing the boatswain was that there was the storm in the beginning of Tempest, and Downing had that storm. We played on the lighting booth that was at the back of the amphitheater, on top of that lighting booth. And I just thought that was so amazing. That was such it was just wonderful thing to do. And so on from there, I continued doing courses and studying and scenes and stuff. And the next
and
thing,
then you met Kent and Henry Brown, and you did The Fabulous Miss Marie by Ed Bullins.
At one point, that there was a time when we were doing a lot of plays by Black authors and stuff. And one of the plays was The Fabulous Miss Marie, that another student, Henry Brown, directed. And we had we were fortunate enough to be able to get Ed Bullins to come to Antioch and to do a lecture on the play, and that was a wonderful experience. And just to meet like an author that was so involved in the off Broadway theater back in the mid 70s. And with this play, we also did we worked with the woman who played Marie Horton was a Central State student, Ashaki Samari, and you know, it was just such a combination. It was great that we were able to involve Central State, getting actors from Central State to also perform at Antioch. And then, well,
Then you went on to Hearst, and that was your really first major role as Sin Q, the head of the Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA, and tell us about that.
Yeah, we did, and so Hearst was another play by Mark Dunow, and it was the SLA and Patty Hearst after she was kidnapped. The play starts with us returning to our safe house with Patty Hearst in tow, and the set was an incredible set that Mark Gammon, he played Stephen Weed, Patty Hearst's sweetheart at the time, but he was very integral in helping us create the set that we use, because we did the play in an environmental theater style, which was started out by a director in New York named Richard Schechner. And but then the thing was that we would have the audience sat around the set itself, on pillows, on cushions, and so we interacted with them as well. You know, where at times that they were members of the SLA, and at one point we even had a trial where the Hearst family was put on trial, and so different members of the audience was given scenes or sets.
Yeah, here you get a really good picture of the whole thing with the audience.
Yeah, that's the whole set right there. And underneath that, Capitalism Sucks, there's a woman sitting there. That's Rose Stockton. That's the night that I met Rose Stockton. In front of her is this gentleman named Kent Alexander. I met and next to Kent, to his right, is this guy named Philip Stockton, who was Rose's husband at the time. Philip eventually started his own sound company when they moved to New York, and he won an Academy Award working with the Coen brothers. And Rose and Kent and I, we did a lot of work at Antioch of getting shows and putting together things that was very good. And part of the thing though too is that I never really wanted to leave campus, because I was terrified that if I went someplace, like if I went to like Chicago, New York, or LA, how the hell was I going to get back to Antioch? You know, I was really afraid of not being able to get back. And because I was on parole, I would always have to get things cleared with my parole officer. And so that became a big thing of when we did eventually tour Hearst, because we did it one quarter, and then it was such a success that we did it another quarter, and then toured it to Washington, D.C. and to New York City, performed in the Performing Garage, which is like, there was, at that time, it was La Mama's, and the Performing Garages was like the major off-Broadway houses. But then while we were there, while we were doing the tour in New York, Downey wanted us to live as the SLA might live, you know. And so we had a storefront. We had gotten a storefront then we were all living, the whole cast was living in this storefront. And I hated New York in
In
1970.
the Bowery, no,
In the
less.
the Bowery of New York, 1976.
Yeah.
When we would leave to go to rehearsal or to go to the show, a lot of times we had to step over Bowery bums to get to the theater. And unfortunately, the Performing Garage though wasn't very far from it, so it was a walk. We were able
Yeah,
to
it
walk.
was a quick walk. And
Yeah.
so we should show the clip, which is just a minute, and then we'll move on to a couple of other things
Yes.
to wrap things up. Yeah.
Call is probably what it was.
Yes, you know me. Yes, indeed, you know me.
Oh, this
You
is a
have
different-
always known me. I'm that nigga you feared day and night. I'm that nigga you killed hundreds of people in the pain, hope of finding. I'm that nigga that is no longer just hunted and robbed and murdered. I'm that nigga that hunts you now.
Now, this was another section of
So that gives you the impression. Yeah. Go
but
ahead.
yeah, but Sin-Q was very at a high pitch through most of the play, and that was part of the thing that as I was a student at Antioch, became better at modulating, and there was a thing of that while we were on the tour in New York, that I had started deciding to work on what was going to be my senior project. And it turned out that what we wanted to do was to do a two-hander. And at that time, some really great two-handers were being done by Athol Fugard. And so we were able to get the rights to Sizwe Banzi is Dead.
And
Sizwe
these four
Banzi-
photos you just saw are from that. Yeah. Go ahead, Will.
And Sizwe Banzi is Dead is a play about the identity cards of South Africa that was happening in South Africa. And one of the characters, the first character that you saw was Styles, the photographer. And the play starts off with Styles going through and talking about and sharing with the audience what brought him to being a photographer. And while he's doing that, a gentleman comes in who calls himself Robert Zwellinzima. And so the two of them get to talking, and Robert eventually tells him about another guy named Buntu, who he had met and who had talked him into letting Sizwe, who his name was, Sizwe Banzi needed to die in order for Robert Zwellinzima to be able to get work in South Africa. And so that's why the play was called Sizwe Banzi is Dead. But we were able to also, the big thing about it was that we were able to get this director by the name of Cosmo Pieterse, who is South African, and he was able to come to Antioch and help us with help direct the play, which gave us a lot of connection with the language and just the environment of what was going on in South Africa. And I did the play with Kent Alexander, and it was, we did have a videotape of it, but like Downing said, that tape was destroyed during that rainstorm.
And
During
then
the rainstorm.
we'll wrap up with the Lower Depths, which was Paul Treichler came out of retirement to direct.
Yeah, which was, and Paul was also really, I mean, everybody, the acting students at the time, when Paul would also come to direct, not direct, but to teach his class on styles of theater, which is like a wonderful class. And in this in the cast of the Lower Depths, as you can see there, was such a great cast of people who had been at Antioch in that time, like Peter Ekstrom, Christy Beatman, Vince was in it, Karen Wagner. Karen was wonderful in this, just as Karen was also in Hearst. And my goodness, Karen was such a wonderful actress when back then. those days up. Roger was also in Lower Depths. Roger, David Jaffe, and Mark Gammon. You know, Paul had a name that he called those guys. You know, but it was that was such a wonderful experience, and then that was also kind of like one of the first times that I had any type of real a part that had some substance in it. And here's a little scene from it that we did with Rose Stockton as a play.
I looked up. Two men. As they were opening a window, I was so busy that they didn't notice anything at all with me. I shouted to them, "Hey there! Get on the mat!" Would you believe it? They came at me with a hand axe. "Halt, I warn! Halter else I fire!" Then I aimed first at one, and then at the other. They fell to their knees, saying, "Pardon us." Hell, I was pretty hot on account of the hand axe. "You devils," I cried. "I told you to clear out and you didn't. Now when do you go into the breach and get a switch?" It was done. Now I commanded, one of you lie out on the ground and the other thrash him. So they beat each other in my command.
Yeah, and so it was. I feel that during that production that I became more aware of using different tones and things that from talks with Meredith Dallas, that it was at one point that I was talking with him, and he was talking to me about artistry and being an artist, and that part of a thing of being an artist is that you have to use colors in a way that can enhance or show more, you know. And so you might have to use the color blue, but there are different shades of blue, just like in using text, there can be different shades in using a text. Sometimes it might be indigo blue, but sometimes it might be turquoise, you know? And so, and that really had a really huge effect on me. And to this day, it's a quality that I try to instill and try to and take note of.
And Susan, you can bring in the cast shot of Lower Depths. I think we have a really good photo of that.
Yeah, and this was the cast, and down there in front of me, the old-looking guy, is Vince Waldron, and to the left of Vince is Karen, and to the right of Vince is Roger, a young Roger Babb, who also had a really incredible scene with me, and that we were thinking about saying it, but he was just too damn good. So we went with another scene. And behind Roger is Dave Jaffe. Next to Dave, you have Mark Gammon, and next to Mark is the incredible Peter Ekstrom. Behind David Jaffe, you have Kent Alexander, and next to Kent is Karen Salzman, who's also listening here today too. And so these people, it's just incredible. It's just an amazing thing. It was a wonderful experience. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. People, we worked together. Slide of me with Alan Siege, who had his senior project that he did a production where he wrote a thing about Lenny Bruce that was called Lenny Bruce Comic, you know, and I had a small little thing to do.
And last thing, if you can show the 30 seconds of the video of Peggy leading the home. This is the halftime show in the sports play, we thought, because it's a tribute to Antioch.
Take a blue and gold, blue and gold, add a little soul, Antioch, yeah, 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 Antioch, yeah, 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 Antioch, yeah, 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 Antioch. You take the sugar and spice, sugar and spice, so everything nice, everything nice. Antioch, yeah, 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 Antioch, yeah, 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 Antioch, yeah, 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 Antioch.
sense of it being something other, the form of it, if that you had a sense of that when you're in it.
I mean, the entire experience of doing Lower Depths, I mean, it was very, very intense. And it was really wonderful to have, like, you know, Roger and there, because he helped quite a bit as far as of the direction and some of the flavor of the piece itself, you know. So yeah, there was, and for me, who hadn't had very much working with classical pieces and stuff, because even I had spoken to Dowling, I mean, about it, that before I'd taken on, it was one of my co-ops of being afraid to leave Yellow Springs, was to work as the tech director at with Jimmy Rose, you know, and one of the plays that Downing directed was The Merry Wives of Windsor, that I did not want to try to be in because I felt that I did not have a control of that kind of language, you know, but I did build a set, you know, and so, but then working with Paul on that text of Lower Depths gave me a lot of confidence, that so that when I eventually ended up going to NYU, that doing Shakespeare and classics became a really major part of what I was able to do, because I was able to then even get the job right after NYU to return to Antioch for the rebooting of Theater Antioch Under the Stars that had Mr. Lithgow, Arthur Lithgow, directing. You know, so I was able to be directed by Paul Treichler, Meredith Dallas, Arthur Lithgow, and Downing Cliss. I was able to get them all, you know. I feel very fortunate in that.
This is Roger Babb. And, you know, from me, to see you guys and hear you guys remember Antioch makes me really emotional, you know. It's like,
yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
And that experience for me was like a wild one, because it was from the 60s through the 70s, you know, and in this weird time, but also that Paul was there and Downing was there and Meredith Dallas was there, and all these people who were so supportive, unbelievably, you know, helpful. And it stuck with me my whole career in the theater. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how that affected you to work with such interesting people.
It was powerful. And also, you need to know that you have sort of lived on my shoulder all this time in some way. Because I teach at NYU. I've been doing that for 25 years. And I teach theater. And the first thing I do is have them lie down on their backs, and breathe in and breathe out. And the relaxation exercises and getting out of your head and being in the moment. All of that is you lit the match on that. And I'm grateful. I think we all are. I'm grateful to have worked with all these people. But since you're here, I have not had a chance to say that to you, and I need to say that.
Well, thank you very much.
I have to say that too. I have to be on that ticket too, because it was Roger who told me that when I got to New York, what I need to do is to go and talk to Joe Chaikin and Paul Zimmett. I said to him, Roger, are you crazy? I mean, these guys I can't do that. But eventually I did get to meet those guys, and they continue to be, well, of course, Joe is gone now, but Paul is like my older brother now, you know, and like Louise is here. Louise, like I said, I met Louise when we did Mother Courage, and then she was Ariel in Downing's thing, and she was in the first show that I did with Talking Band in 1975 and 1978, Pedro Paramo, and we've done so many things since then, you know. And Lizzie Olesker, who was in the crowd here. I mean, with Dave Jaffe, we did one of Lizzie's plays, The Bohemian, that I keep saying, Lizzie, we need to do that again. You know?
Going back to Roger for a minute, the first play that I did was not at Antioch. It was on Co-op at Skidmore College, and Roger was my roommate. He had already been there when I got there, and I was 17-year-old, right out of high school and scared to death in Saratoga Springs, New York, probably the only Black person in there. And Roger was there as my rock. And thank you, Roger.
Yeah, and I was hoping that maybe JL could even say something more about the early 70s of when you were there, of what shows were that Downing wasn't able to speak about.
Yeah, Downing came in after I left. I was there when Esteban came in summer of '70. The first 3 shows that Esteban did were musicals. He did Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. Then he did the Threepenny Opera, and then Simply Heavenly by Langston Hughes was the first Black show that he did. But in all of the shows that he did in 70, 71, I was really impressed with the fact that he included not only the students and faculty, but he went out into the community, which is kind of the Antioch way.
That's
that's kind of the Antioch way.
In Threepenny Opera, he cast Shelley Blackman, the owner of the store downtown. Yes, he was Mr. Peachum. And Randy Vega, his wife, was Mrs. Peachum.
Right.
And that kind of community involvement has followed me throughout my career, which was fairly short-lived, but I was impressed with that. But also, Downing, you mentioned at the beginning, Les McClellan, who directed Ceremonies in Dark Old Men. I was in that. That was his senior project. And the year before that, Ladoris Hazard, Cordell, the judge, Superior Court judge in California, who you've probably seen on TV recently, directed Dutchman. Me and Mimi Hard. In Dutchman. 71 is her senior project. So the whole Black students at Antioch preceded Peggy. You were there. I remember you very well. Fellow St. Louisan. But there were other things going on even before Esteban got there. But I recognize the things that he did, or the things that happened along with him, or when he came in. There was a very big influx of Black students in 70 from 70 to 73, I guess. And Caril Powell, who, by the way, her husband died just last month. Remembering her. But just all these names have popped up in the last hour that I remember very fondly, and that's it.
And one of the things too that touches me about this time now is that we continue to work together.
That's right.
I've been working with Cora Hook. I've done several plays with Cora through Touchstone Theater, and Louise Smith and Lizzie Olesker and I will be there in Yellow Springs in a week or tomorrow we leave. So.
Yeah, you open this show, Language of Dolls, next week, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
In Yellow Springs.
In Yellow Springs at the Foundry Theater.
You and Lizzie and Louise. That's fabulous.
Neela just asked a question about she says she was a theater major at Antioch in the 50s. When were the first Black actors appearing at Antioch? I don't know when. I'm sure it's forever ago, but there was a major focus on recruiting Black Black students rather, starting in '66 with the Antioch Program for Interracial Education, which I was a
Yes, yes,
so there were a number of students, St. Louis, Chicago, Cincinnati, New York, who all came in at that time in '66. Les McClellan was one of them. Les was the first, I think. No, he wasn't. Daisy McElrath was the first Black theater major that I knew of, and she graduated in '69. Les graduated in '71, I believe. But
Can I jump in?
Were there were some of the students, like I remember Charles Bell and others, who went out to places like Webster College looking for young people to to try to help along to go further from Antioch College?
Chuck Bell wasn't in the theater that I know of, but he definitely was there at that time. Maceo Cofield was in the theater. He was in Ceremonies in Dark Old Men.
But I think Jesse Triclett also had a program going in the 50s of recruiting transfer students from Africa to come to the Antioch campus, and maybe Paula Triclett can remember more about that, but I do remember that was happening, that she was first and probably the only person in the country doing anything like that. And I just, I'm trying to remember, even if in the Shakespeare Under the Stars, which of course went parallel with my time there, I was very fortunate, whether they even brought any Black actors in from New York, from, where Elvis Crabb and all those guys came.
Well, one very famous one I remember, Moses Gunn was there.
Oh, yes. All right, Moses Gunn.
Moses was at
Earl
the
Hyman.
amphitheater,
Earl
not
Hyman.
the
Yes,
Shakespeare Festival.
yes, and
Wasn't-
Moses Gunn was in Black Girl too. Yes.
He was. Oh, that's
He was on the
fabulous.
road. I was on the road. I went on the road.
On the road with him. That's fabulous connection.
Kenneth, you've been trying to say something forever.
Well, yeah, forever. As one of the older people here, I was there in '61 to '66. A couple of historical notes. One, yes, we had Kenyans and Nigerians, Tom Mboya, I think, in the 50s. And in the 60s, in '64, '65, the school made a couple of crazy decisions about investing in Putney and doing all sorts of things. And sadly, they released Whitney LeBlanc, who was a Black director and theater person and an extraordinary individual and a friend of mine, who then had to leave and went on to other famous things and wrote books and so forth.
A lot of that is what caused the demise of the Black theater program and the number of Black students and the reductions of financial aid.
It's a tale of woe that repeats itself.
Yeah, and unfortunately, yeah.
And the other problem with Antioch is we never graduated enough people who got terribly rich and gave money back to the school.
Yeah.
Though I think when it was in bankruptcy this last time, it's the alums who really saved it and separated it out from the rest of the university, all these other campuses, so that at least it's struggling on its own now. Yeah.
I just want to go back. I want to go back to a moment where I was a young Antioch student, two times in an audience where I saw the sports piece in the amphitheater, which blew my mind. And the second one was sitting in the back row of a packed house in the Foundry Theater watching God's Trombone and being completely blown away that this is a college production. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just, it was mind-boggling, and touched me deeply and made, I felt like I've got heroes now.
Yeah.
I've got, I've got heroes that I want to emulate, older students and fellow students. It was really amazing. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and I said something in my write-up. I learned so much about racism and injustice during my time, 7 years at Antioch, from the students, like Peggy and Will, et cetera, and from my colleagues, especially Esteban, who was there for half of my time. He was there for 5 years, and I never knew Walter Dallas, and Dwayne, who was there just for a year or two. And I want to just pay homage to them, because I would have hoped that Esteban particularly could have been here today, but none of them could be here, because very sadly, all three of them have passed away. And Dwayne, of course, only a few years after he left Antioch. And then, so of course, Whitney LeBlanc passed away just a year or two ago. We found out at one of these backstages about that.
And he came to backstage the month before. He was in this audience.
Yeah. I would say one of the hallmarks of what has marked all of us who went to Antioch in that 60s and 70s period, because it was so small, is that we came away with a much broader sense of what the world was all about on all those issues than if we had gone to some giant state school like Ohio State or any of those places. And it's marked us forever. That's why we're all still a little crazy this week, waiting on what's going to happen.
Oh my!
If I may, I'd like to interject something, an anecdote, if you will. This is Walter Pinkowski, and that has to do with when I joined the repertory company of the National Shakespeare Festival in San Diego, California. It's held in Balboa Park every year, but it runs from April through September. At any rate, after I had auditioned and was part of the company and the repertory company, to which I owe a great debt to Meredith Dallas, because he got he put me in my first role as Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing in '74. But midstream, we had to re-audition for Edward Payson Call, the director who was directing Troilus and Cressida that summer. And I, at that point, I already had my good roles in the cast, and to be vulgar and quite accurate, I didn't really give a shit about what role I got in Troilus and Cressida. Didn't really know the play. So I auditioned with an Antioch t-shirt, shorts, and I had a fishing pole, and I did some sort of a comic routine where I was casting the pole out into an empty audience. And anyway, in the middle of this comic routine I was doing, and Edward Payson Call, the director, stopped and goes, wait a second, just stop, Walter. I said, yeah, what is it? And he said, you got that Antioch t-shirt on. I said, yeah. So I went, that's why I graduated from there in '75. Do you know Meredith Dallas? And as it turned out, he had been part of the grand Antioch Shakespeare Festival back in the 50s or early 60s, and had such reverence for Meredith, and that really touched me back then. And later that year, I came back home because I'm originally from the Dayton area. I stopped around Christmas time. I stopped in and saw Willa and Meredith, and I told them that story. Anyway, that's it.
So, yeah. So before we close out, I just want to say that
can I say just one thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I was in The Dutchman, they're directed by Esteban, and it felt to me at that time, because I was I was a freshman. Surprisingly.
yeah.
I was too naive to understand how over my depth I was in that role.
And
But,
Lula is a Lulu of a role. Yeah.
yeah, and I was told by, I think it was Trisha Arlen, was that in the theater department, was that?
Yeah.
It was a feminist white woman that told me, you know, that's you're playing like the white woman devil of the, you know, she was trying to educate me like this is not really a good role for women. But anyway, it did feel to me like it was sort of on the edge of that whole ending of the Antioch experiment with you know, with the Black Theater Department falling apart and the funding falling apart. And I know, Karen, you may have also remembered this, but things were kind of in a disarray, and Esteban did have to, you know, he did have to go deep into that community. You were talking about the Yellow Springs, the Springfield community, to get all the actors, all the Black actors to do these plays. I mean, Happy Endings was a pretty large cast for a one act, and it was winter time, and there were snowstorms, and the actors weren't showing up in time for the productions. And you know, The Dutchman was supposed to be the third show of the 3 acts, and oftentimes he would throw me in like the second play because the actors from Springfield hadn't arrived from the snowstorm. So there was an undermining, a sense of, I mean, it was wonderful, but there was also, you could tell things were kind of coming apart at the seams at that moment.
I had just a couple of stories. One actually is about someone who is left out of any accounts of theater, and his name is Mac Green. And his family, Mac and Faye Green, and their daughter Sylvia, they were very good friends of my parents. And Mac taught physical education at Wilberforce. And he was also a sculptor and a playwright. And Antioch did produce one of his plays. I can't remember the name because I get it mixed up with Emperor Jim for some reason. You know, they were very involved in the theater at Antioch. And for him, of course, it was kind of a, like Will talked about going from Wittenberg to Antioch. So for him at Wilberforce, which, you know, wasn't big on creative arts, coming to Antioch was like a breath of, you know, fresh air for him. The other story is that one of the African students who came to Antioch was named Julius Kiano. And he was from Kenya, and he ended up being the first finance minister of independence when Kenya got its independence under Tom Mboya, whose younger brother, Alphonse Mboya, Alphonse Okuku, rather, came to Yellow Springs through Arthur Morgan somehow and went to high school with us, and then went to Antioch. And he was a good pal of a lot of us who grew up in Yellow Springs. But the last story I wanted to tell, well, so Julius Kiano fell in love with Coretta Scott. He just thought she was fabulous. And he asked her out, and she turned him down. Well, my mother was advisor to both Julius and Coretta. And she said to Coretta, why did you turn down Julius Kiano? He's a wonderful, smart guy. He's going to go places. And she said, oh, Jessie, I just didn't want to get involved in causes. So I guess, I don't know, maybe Neela can speak to this, but I guess there was some kind of taboo about about foreign students. I don't know what it was, but she thought it would be a big deal and a cause that she didn't want to get involved in. And the last thing I want to say is that she herself didn't officially get her degree at Antioch because the college refused to, she didn't have enough co-op credits. And so my mother for years tried to get the co-op department to say, to count her activism, her work with Martin Luther King, all of her stuff to count as co-op credits. And they said, we can't make an exception for her just because she's famous, blah, 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 blah. Well, then in 1965, the college wanted Martin Luther King to speak at our commencement in 65. And so a deal was struck that if he spoke, they would give her co-op credits. And I thought Peggy might find that a little bit the same as being withdrawn from Antioch and then being reinstated with open arms. Anyway, what a lot of stories. And it's wonderful to hear from all of you and all your connections. Just great.
But I feel like I missed so much of what Antioch had to offer from what you guys are talking about. I had a wonderful time when I was there. I was involved in quite a few productions, but I still feel like I missed what Antioch was. And so it's very refreshing to hear what everybody has to say about this. I went back to Antioch with some friends who were looking at it for their son. I'm not sure where Antioch will go and what meat they can offer, because everybody here has had a good solid meal from their experience at Antioch. And I think it's kind of a do-it-yourself degree at this point and very self-directed. And I'm not sure what it has to offer in the long run.
One of the things that did happen during the New Antioch was in the theater/performance area was a wonderful professor named Gabrielle Seville, who was a Black feminist performance artist from Minneapolis. She was there for 5 years. She did really incredible work with the students. She was a wonderful colleague. She brought amazing artists to Antioch. She had something called Experiments in Joy, where she brought 8 women performance artists from around the country, and they did this amazing festival. She's at Cal Arts now. She wrote a book called Experiments in Joy. She's a tremendous artist, and she was there for 5 years, not that long ago, and really created a very effective, amazing teacher, but also human artist. So, there was some good energy there. In recent years, since COVID, COVID really, really hit college hard. It's all any institution that was fragile, any people that were fragile, as we know, COVID really did a number. And I think it's been hard to recover from that.
Yeah.
And it is, I would say, too small. Getting critical mass about, everybody's like, well, why aren't you doing theater? Well, good luck with that. Like, you can't get a cast and you can't get an audience, Although Chris Westhoff now at the Foundry, yes, the place is packed, but a music venue a lot. So anyway, just to say that there has been some wonderful stuff in the New Antioch. It's just a different time and a different world.
And I do want to pay homage for a moment through the thick and thin of a couple of different bankruptcies and the college being constantly on edge. Did a remarkable work, in the theater program for 35 years. Okay. And I was there for 7. So let's put that, you're 5 times the time that I spent at Antioch in the 70s.
The times I've been back to Yellow Springs, most recently about 2 years ago, this time actually, Yellow Springs itself is unique in southwestern Ohio by virtue of the fact that it had been a conduit on the Underground Railroad, prior to and during the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War. And there are many Black families there who date back to that time.
Sure.
Their roots come from however, it's contradictory that with the realization through the national media that Dave Chappelle lives nearby there. There has been an influx of people wanting to move into Yellow Springs where the supposedly the education for children is still excellent. But Dave, Mr. Chappelle, I don't know, I can't call him Dave, but has been investing in real estate development in the YSO area. The result of which is that many of these multi-generational Black families that have lived there, called Yellow Springs home, they can no longer afford to live there. And that it has become, extremely expensive to live in Yellow Springs, to enjoy the village, to be in that area. And okay, so I'm going to shut up now. I said my piece. I'd like to know your response to what I just put forth.
I don't think Dave Chappelle can be blamed for.
Exactly. It's not Dave Chappelle. It's just the housing prices continue to sort of go up as Yellow Springs continues to be an appealing place to live.
He's doing something that no one else at this point is able to do. And we should be happy.
Maybe he'll give enough to the college to keep it
Yeah,
going.
if only. His father did teach there, but so far.
He was a colleague, by the way. He was a colleague of mine in the co-op.
Yeah. It's not more now than it was then. There are some exciting things that are happening. Like there's a film festival, Yellow Springs Film Festival. Jim Jarmusch brought a film and was, the theater filled with all these exciting people and join in this discussion and stuff. I think there's a difference between this notion of it being a destination place as if that's sort of a bad thing. The Shakespeare Festival at its height was bringing in 1,000 people a night. The other thing to think about in terms of the Shakespeare Festival, it was ad hoc. They were throwing this thing together with little money, and there are about 50 chairs and sitting out in front of the stage. Halfway through the first season, which was all they were aiming to do, which is the history plays, they ran out of money. And what's his name? Alexander.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah.
WB.
Yeah. Was standing in for the president because the president had left. They were between presidents. And because of the whole McCarthy thing was getting such bad press at Antioch. And the Shakespeare Festival was starting to get good press. Not all that many people were coming, but it was good press. He said, continue with it. And all of a sudden, this thing started to sort of snowball. By the end of the season, they were in the black, which is for a theater is absolutely unheard of. Yeah. But the important thing to understand is it was this thing that nobody thought was going to go someplace. And it sort of grew from the inside. So this notion of people sort of improvising to make things happen at Antioch goes way, way back. The second president of Antioch started out financially nearly bankrupt, but went bankrupt after about 5 years in existence. The second president described Antioch as megalomania complicated by insolvency.
I forgot that.
But it's had this history of always sort of trying to come back, trying to define itself.
And I just wanted to thank Peggy and Will and Downing and everybody who was here to talk about this wonderful era of Antioch's history. And all the great work you guys did while you were there and after. It just was amazing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would just like to say that, but this was great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is terrific.
So much,
Thanks so much, Downing.
Thank you,
Peggy.
Thank you.
Peggy, Bill, and Downing. Beautiful job.
Also, I put in the chat, I put the link to all the videos of previous backstage programs.
Thank you so much, Barry, for that amazing work you all have done. It's really incredible.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You guys are
And good luck with Language of Doll.
great material to work with.
Yes.
Yeah, good luck on the
Break
show.
a leg. Break a leg.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Bye, Peggy. Bye, Will.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
you.
Great.